I always ask the leadership team when I get to meet them first is, so tell me, what's your purpose? Have you understood the purpose of the target company? How is that target company living their purpose? How are you living your purpose? And when I understand these two things, then I think you understand why a business is buying another business.
Welcome to the Oxford Talk podcast. If for the people who don't know you or who haven't met you before, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Walid, for having me here on this prestigious podcast, and I'm really honored to spend the time now with you. Further to your question, well, when you want to grow a business, you can do this many ways. You can do this organically, but you can also buy a company. And so in my early stage, in my early career, I got in touch with that field of buying and selling companies. And one thing came out that really struck me and that really created a lot of passion in me was helping company A when they buy company B to integrate these two companies. And that's what I do today.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Thomas, building a business is so hard. And, being an entrepreneur myself, it demands just some next level commitment to you, time, effort, and energy. How far is that journey of the acquisitions and mergers? Do you think it's something relevant to small businesses as well, or it's only we're talking about some gigantic Fortune 500 enterprises?
It actually happens in all types of sizes of companies. So you can find that in small companies, you can find that in mid-size or mid-cap companies and large-cap companies.
And for the listeners, what is a cap? Can you explain it to them?
Yeah, very good question. Because I tend to
Yes.
go
People, we don't
into
know
my
it.
lingo. A mid cap or a large cap or a small cap company is a capitalization. So cap stands for capitalization, and that speaks towards the market value of that business. So if you have small businesses, 2-4 million in revenue, for example, these are typically small cap companies. So they have a smaller capitalization. Their value is smaller than that of a mid-sized company or of a large company, like the big ones that we know from the stock exchange.
Amazing. And Thomas, how does the valuation part of the company works? Because I think some of our listeners, I think in any given country at any given time, majority of the businesses tend to be small businesses. They can be small media companies, hairdressers, and coffee shops and all of that. And they might be thinking that valuation is something that I don't know, you have to get lawyers to do it for you and all of that. How do you, in your practice, how when you look at a business, where does the value comes from?
Well, two things. Let's not talk about the valuation process itself. We can talk about that as well. But where's the value actually coming from? Well, the value is coming from the revenue and the profitability that you're generating. That's essentially what's important, because if I understand this business is growing significantly and is generating a solid profitability, then the next step is to understand what cash flow, so what cash contribution is a business like that developing. And based on that, you have an understanding or good understanding of the value, or you can generate a good understanding of the value that a business
Amazing.
actually creates.
And Thomas, how does one even get into this industry? You said you had a very early exposure, and I remember meeting you once last year. You mentioned that you had to start in a medical field first. What
Right.
made you sort of switch to gears to, like, I mean, this is a completely different world, isn't it?
It is a totally different world.
How did that happen?
Um, First of all, I was doing an MBA in Lausanne, Switzerland, and we had Iqbal Lambert, one of the professors that was at the same time also the business development director for RJR Reynolds Nabisco, which was back then still the tobacco brand and the cookie brand together in that
Wait, so
company.
they were doing both products
They
together.
were doing both products
Oh wow,
at
that
the
would never
time.
happen today, isn't it? Yeah.
And he taught us corporate finance. So he taught us how to buy and sell companies. He taught us about joint ventures and so forth. And that kind of triggered me very much because I saw that this was really an interesting field that I would want to immerse myself in. And part of that class was that we had to do a project. And so a colleague of mine and I, co-student of mine and I, we decided ultimately to work with a custom hip implant manufacturer.
Oh yeah.
Young company, yeah, was growing nicely and had solid profitability. And they were making their products not themselves in their own company. They had outsourced that production. So they had a company that owned machines, CNC machines, and these CNC machines would essentially, based on
Build the products.
information
Yeah, yeah.
they got from the company, they would build that custom hip implant. And my job was to do a make or buy study for them. So to analyze from which volume onwards it would actually make sense for the business to insource the production and no longer have it outsourced.
It's amazing.
And yeah, that was an interesting start because after having done that study, the entrepreneur asked me whether I wanted to build up the German market for them. And that's what I did for a couple
That's
of
really
years.
amazing. Thomas, I want to ask you why, because I'm for those of you who haven't seen Thomas's talk, it's live and you can definitely watch it on YouTube. You talk about a very interesting point in that, which is the humanness of all of this world, which is kind of, as you say in the talks, is hidden behind the suits and ties and everything. I want to ask you, what really appealed to you? Numbers looked at as for someone like yourself who has done 46 mergers and acquisitions, there has to be some human part to it that I like doing this job. Because every job has its complexities, and you can easily get disheartened by that. But what was really that something for you that clicked with this industry?
The My early start in the industry was that I focused primarily on synergies. So when company A buys company B and you put them together into one cohesive organization, you look for benefits. Yeah, you look for synergies. How can we increase revenue? Where can we take out operating expenses? How can we manage our capital expenditures more efficiently? You look for these opportunities where you can save or where you can grow and expand the top line, the revenue side. And that's what is an important and significant part of, yeah, of that entire job,
There's a lot
bringing
of
these two
humans
companies
interacting.
together.
Yeah.
Now, when you only look at those financials, it's like a very technocratic approach.
Hmm.
When you miss the human element in it, it's not really successful in the end, or it can often turn out to be not really successful in the end. So what I learned from a very early stage on, because I focused on that purely value and financially driven field, that I realized, wait a moment, we are only going to get these values created if we actually bring all the people into this, if we engage them, if we really get them interested, if we make them part of that entire
Yeah.
endeavor.
Thomas, I feel like it's such a gigantic task. I mean, having worked with you on different projects as well, I understand the gravity of these mergers, that there might be 10,000 people working in one company and 15,000 on the other company, and then a merger is happening or an acquisition is happening. I mean, 15,000, 25,000 people to come under one banner. That almost feels like a job of a politician to rally up that much of a half of a city of a crowd. Okay, you're gonna rally under one brand. This is what we're gonna do. It looks a gigantic task. How do you break it down, and how do you sort of structure that alignment then? And what are the kind of steps to it?
Mhm. Very good point. Um, I have done these mega mergers as you point towards, because I've done, for example, Goodyear and Sumitomo Rubber. They made tires, essentially the Japanese, one of the dominant Japanese tire brands, and one of the dominant US tire brands. But I would like to actually more focus on the larger mid-size sector,
Which
because
sector did you mention? Sorry.
on the larger mid-size company sector.
And how do you define larger, mid-size? What does that mean?
Um, these would be companies that would have probably 200 to 2,000 employees.
Thomas, for people who really want to sort of learn from you, when you say so a company becomes a mid-sized mark company when you have 200 to 2,000 employees. How,
That's how I define it.
it's open to debate, or that's
Well,
just roughly.
logically, there is you logically it's defined also, but if you really look at the dynamics that go on, once you grow up to about 150, 200 people, it's a different animal of a business that you run. And once you go beyond 2,000, it's again a different animal. And you may be aware that when you run a small company with 5, 10 people, and you grow that, you need a certain skill set of doing that.
Yeah.
And the larger it becomes, the different or the very different skill set you need ultimately.
So you focus on the ones which are beyond 2,000 roughly.
I focus on those that are between 150, 200 to 2,000.
Okay.
That's my sweet spot essentially.
And walk me through these steps. Like when again let's say that company, two mergers are happening, the tire brand that you mentioned. What was the kind of challenges, and how did you make sure that happened smoothly?
Well, think about it from the employee's point of view, yeah, and at the same time think about it from the leadership's point of view, yeah, because these are two poles that we need to bring together, yeah. So the leadership team has been involved with the strategy department, with the M&A department, or with folks that they have brought on board, identifying a target company that will help them either geographically or technically or access wise, capacity wise to grow. Yeah, that's essentially what they want to do. They don't want to only grow organically, they want to grow inorganically by buying another company. And when the leadership decides to actually grow through mergers and acquisitions, through buying essentially another company, the question that comes up is, okay, where is that company fitting from a strategy point, from a strategic point of view into our business? And quickly, will this not be just what are they doing? What capabilities do people have? It will actually touch on several things. It will touch on the value proposition
Yeah.
that the target company brings to the table. It will touch on the capabilities that a team of people brings to the table, and ultimately on the products and services that a company helps the acquirer build. Yeah, this is kind of the profile, and then and that's where I piggybacked a little bit on Simon Sinek. When you look into his TED talk about the golden circle, he actually starts with the purpose, why you do what you do, and then how you do that, what your purpose is. And only at the last time he says, actually, we're joining in the what.
Yeah.
And so I always ask the leadership team when I get to meet them first is, so tell me, what's your purpose? Have you understood the purpose of the target company? How is that target company living their purpose? How are you living your purpose?
Yeah.
And when I understand these two things, then I think you understand why a business is buying another business. And
Yeah.
then you actually can look into what they do, so products and services.
Tom-
The,
Thomas,
the,
I was going to quickly ask you what is the element of, let's say, because in the a normal person hearing these news which happen, there feels like it's an element of hostility to an acquisition, let's say. And there are different industries which are more prone to acquisitions, and therefore, let's say, if I'm not saying it too obviously, but if it's like the pharmaceutical industry, there are a lot of mergers happening. You discover one medicine, and you
yeah.
just kind of merge. What have you discovered, like how the dynamic when you walk into the rooms where an acquisition is happening? What's the company? What's the kind of the feeling of the company which is being acquired? What are their concerns versus a merger is happening? Are they more friendly to each other? That because it's kind of a joint venture going on.
Well, interesting question that you're highlighting here. I think based on what I just described with regard to the profile and their why, their purpose, and how they live their purpose and so forth, the important thing is that you need to bring that across to all the managers, all the employees in a business. Because if they do not understand why you are buying another company, if they don't understand the strategic rationale and how these will actually make sense in the combination, then what you quickly have happening is the fear monger
Yeah.
starts to grow. So when Pricewaterhouse and I was at Coopers and Lybrand formed PricewaterhouseCoopers, the question for me was, okay, am I going to have a job? And the answer was yes, probably, don't worry. They have 23 days of vacation. I have 15. Will I actually be bumped up? So
Combine out.
you
Yeah.
see, it's immediately about
Yeah.
what does this do with me? Yeah, and it's a very natural tendency to
Get scared, I
do
think.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and leadership is therefore really um, asked to bring clarity into this. And my experience has shown that I have developed a structure with three key events. And those three key events are important to actually unfold and be implemented to be successful in ultimately the integration.
That's amazing. Thomas, so what was the company called? Cooperland?
Coopers and Lybrand
Coopers and Lybrand,
and Price Waterhouse,
which is
they
modern day
formed
PwC.
Price Waterhouse Coopers, which is today PwC.
And it's a massive, massive firm. And so I'm remembering you, and we talked about this. You were in America at that point in time.
Right,
How
in
was
New
that
York.
journey? Like, why did you move from Germany to America? Was it because of the work, or you had just like, that's where the land of finance is? I need to be there. Why was that journey there?
Well, already in school, I always wanted to go to the US. Don't tell me why. It was just one of my big dreams.
Especially in New York.
Well, I wanted to in school. I wanted to just
Yeah.
go to the US. And then after my MBA, after I had done my German master's degree as well, the key question for me was, where am I going? What 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 is this? What's in store for me? And I had done right out of school. I had done a banking apprenticeship, so a financial analyst program for 2 years, and that had gotten me close to the stock exchange environment and kept me also in that trading environment. And it was fun for some time. But I realized that buying and selling companies, which is also happening through banks, is actually much more interesting.
And this is what you, in normal terms, you call private equity kind of markets, if I'm not wrong. The acts of, I guess, investment banks doing, because a lot of folks hear these common terms and they get confused. But I would love for you to kind of explain to them what private equity is, like, buying and selling. How does that happen?
Yeah. Um, Let me just finish off that
Sure,
first
sure.
thought.
Sorry. Yeah.
So I wanted to be in that field of mergers and acquisitions. And if you really think about from a German point of view, where is M&A actually happening? Well, it was Frankfurt, which was kind of the small local, the local market. Then you had London, and
Mm.
London was already much more international.
Yeah.
But then, if you really wanted to learn it, you had to go to New York. So for me, it was very clear I wanted to be in New York, and yeah, that's how America came onto
So,
uh, that level playing field.
but quickly, so I'll come to the private
Hmm.
equity definition, but
I'll get to that
essentially,
as well.
it's almost you were one of the first people out there who were the employees of the modern day PwC then.
Yes, I was the first 3 years. I was Coopers and Lybrand, and then it became PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yes.
That's really cool. I mean, do you keep in touch with colleagues, and how did your career move from PwC to where you are now? What was the next step? What did you do?
Well, I mean,
You
we can talk in private.
This is not for the camera.
When you work at a big four firm, and specifically when you work on the transaction services side, typically the hours are long.
Oh, okay.
And when you work in New York, the cultures are also wide and varied. So we had 23 nations in our department, and that meant also that we did deals not only in New York or in the United States or in the continent of North America, South America. No, we did actually globally work. So I got to spend time in Asia, I got to spend time in Europe, got to spend a lot of time logically in North America. And that environment essentially brings you into a very different way of working. Then our son was born in the US in 97, and I kept on traveling as if nothing had happened.
Oh wow.
And eventually, my wife asked me this question: "Whom are you married to?"
Ooh, big one.
Exactly. So I'm still married, but I didn't make partner at PwC in New York.
I kept my original partner, PwC. You can go away. Thank you so much. No, I think these stories are quite a lot. And one of my very personal good friends, he works now at PwC. He started I think 2 3 years ago, and I think I'm beginning to hear some the same things from him as well. That he is traveling a lot. Um, but and again, that Thomas, I think we this I have worked with you for a very long time, and I think some things, and being running business myself, some things can be taken granted as understood.
Mm.
But for the listeners out there, I think they have seen this world from movies and TVs, that the Wall Street, and it's a very like high octane, high energy, that kind of business. Were you part of that culture, or and is it still the same, or do you think the world of finance kind of a bit mellowed down? We have tons and tons of people who heard that people have died essentially because of overworking, and the big four have constantly been at the forefront center of it. And so, do you think that trend is still there? With AI is there to do help with a lot of things, but how was it different for you, and how do you see it now? Do you see it changing in the future? What's your perspective on it?
It's a very good question, and I still feel that the environment is still as tense as it used to be, because you need to think about it from a different angle. When you buy another company,
Yeah.
it's not cheap. Yeah, it doesn't come typically at a very low price. No, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, buying other companies typically involves a significant amount of money. And the higher the amount of money that you're having in that game, essentially, um, the more stress it actually means, because you really need to be precise, you need to be focused, you need to do everything the best way it possibly can be, because only then you will generate the value that you're focusing on. Now, is this totally complicated and difficult? No, it's not. When you grow up in that field, you can you learn how to deal with and how to operate in such an environment. And so it's not something that I wouldn't suggest to I could suggest that to everyone that really puts their focus and their passion into this field, because I think it's an interesting field. And getting into this, why not? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. And the private equity world, to come to that question, what are private equity companies? Let's start probably at that level. Private equity companies are firms that collect essentially money from investors into a fund, and that fund is then invested typically over a period of 3 years into smaller companies, mid-sized companies, larger companies, depending on where they have set their focus on, can have even specific industry focuses. So that's essentially what they do. They set up these funds, and then they buy one company after the other. And
And
it
Thomas, what's the difference between that and a lot of the words, small business folks, they hear the venture capitalists, the VCs. What's the difference you see, and how would you explain it to them?
The difference is the stage of the maturity. I would describe it probably best in this way. When you look at a venture capitalist, what the word already says is venture. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have companies, young companies that either have just a concept. Yeah, they probably go to their friends and their families to get some funds to actually grow the business. At the stage that a venture capitalist comes in, they probably have already developed a product, a minimal viable product. They've probably done their first sales, and now it's about funding that seed round. And seed round, nothing else means, as we can see it, it's a seed
Yeah.
that you have, and you want to see that seed growing into a nicer, bigger plant. Essentially, that's what that actually means.
Yeah, I mean, it's been I went to business school myself, and that's where you kind of get an early gist of these things. I always wondered, like, why is there's a seed round, and then when you get the subsequent investing, it becomes a Series A, Series B, Series C. And I was like, why is not tree A, tree B, tree C? Because as again, that's what sometimes and I'll come to a point about why this is, and that's what one of the things we're doing in Ionics Pay as well, which we've been talking about, the company for the creators and how it's built on chain. That the world of finance is complicated in its terminology,
That's correct. Yeah.
and it is, as you said again, there's so many people getting involved, and it's such a complex thing, so many different structures, VCs, and all of that. And that's where we see a lot of value, that someone like yourself who has a lot of understanding can help bridge that information gap for people. You can be at the very forefront. I mean, for example, when you and I have a conversation, I'd never had to ask you for any terminology. We just go stram in. But think, if for a small business or a medium business, when they hear these things, they might have never heard of these things. And do you think that then there is a point of like getting away from that complexity of finance. And do you think that's going to happen? Is it happening? I try to explain even to my parents how what blockchains are and all of that. If he's like, the world is moving in that direction, but it's moving from one complexity
Hmm.
to another complexity, which is, throw another layer of technology on top. So how do you, in your practice, day to day, when you have to, but have you given it a thought that how can I make it super simple that everyone on the street can understand? Despite having the work that you do, it's not really as simple as you said. So many people are involved. But does that had thought occur to you?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the easiest is really if you speak about your experiences, if you bring out the stories that one has lived through in a career that I have been fortunate to live for the last 30 years. So I think the easiest connector in explaining what that terminology or that jargon actually means is to tell them a story, to tell them this is what happened to me, this is how it unfolded, this is where things um, became challenging, or this is what I learned from that. And I think then people can relate to it. Through
Yeah.
stories, people can relate to things that seemingly appear to be complex, but ultimately it's not that complex.
That's very true. And do you think it's really a case of just putting that information out there about, for example, even small things? That's why I really made an effort asking you. These you might come across like, why is he asking me about what's venture capital, what's Series A? Because I think outside our worlds, a lot of people just don't understand, and they are listeners of the pod. Um, do you think this coming to the topic? Do you think it's an information gap, or do you think it's a storytelling gap? Because you can Google what the venture capital is, and the Wikipedia's and all will give you a very long page of what it is, but people still won't understand it. Do you think there's a need for individuals to story tell the whole thing? I was trying to explain to my partner the blockchain. What is a blockchain? I had to do like sticky notes, like this means this
Mm.
thing and that means that thing, and you have a bit of understanding. But do you think there's more need for that now, or do you think just tell and humans have to take a bit of agency, like, okay, go on and learn yourself? Like, let's say you had to go to New York and would really be in that pit to learn the whole thing. Oh, what are your thoughts on that?
Let me go back to Iqbal Lambert, that worked at RGR Reynolds Nabisco. That was exactly the time when KKR actually, when they looked towards how can we actually split this company up,
Yeah.
yeah, and how can we make a tobacco company out of it and a cookie company out of it, and wouldn't these two companies be much more valuable separate than together in a conglomerate. Yeah. And I think that story itself taught me quite a lot of information that I later on then could relate to. So looking at case studies, looking at stories is an important element in understanding what seems to be for the ordinary person a complex situation.
Amazing. Thomas, what I want to definitely, we've been talking a lot about the Ionic Pay thing, and again, it's an on-chain solution. What are your thoughts on blockchain? What do you think?
I think it is to a certain extent the future of our finance industry. It, um, with and without getting into politics, but with what we see on a global geopolitical environment, um, it is actually an interesting field to get yourself immersed in, to think about what actually blockchain, the fintech industry in total, and cryptocurrency can actually do for us, and clearly understanding that blockchain is not only
Yeah,
cryptocurrency.
yeah. And Thomas, how do you see the difference, like in the landscape of, let's say, fintechs being in Germany? Frankfurt is still a huge hub for the German finance, and you are again. I know you travel quite a lot in between London and America and Asian countries as well. How do you see the landscape of really, let's say, fintech startups? London has been called the home of them, but where do you see the sort of German market sort of coming in?
I think what you will see is that you will have, from that point of view, global hubs for specific industries, where you see that that some countries are stronger in certain areas than others, and that's actually where also you will see the venture capitalist trending towards, or immersing themselves in these markets. So you have Tel Aviv, you have Munich, you have Silicon Valley, Silicon Mountain, which is that Denver
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
hub,
yeah.
or Silicon Beach, which is more Los Angeles. You logically have Boston, and if you look at what they are focusing on, for example, Boston is very much dominated through medical devices, and through biotech. This is a big topic there. If you go to Tel Aviv, a lot of it is security software.
Yes,
So you
cybersecurity. Yeah,
have different focuses on different areas. You have in Germany, for example, the Munich as a hub, with Unternehmertum, a company, or I should almost say a movement that was set up by Mrs. Clutton, the heir of BMW, and she built an ecosystem there, from that spans from academia to the financial world, to corporates, to the startups, to family-owned businesses. And these five dynamics actually work together to form a very strong ecosystem for young startups there. Similar in Stuttgart. So you have these different hubs
and what are the
globally.
BMW ones are focused on? What are they doing?
They're focusing on a lot of things. Yeah, it could be advanced manufacturing, but it could be deep tech as well. It could be environmental technologies, software, B2B, a large variety of
Yeah.
focuses that that they're focusing.
Thomas, I do want to ask you a very. I know you mentioned politics side, but this is kind of like you mentioned about the movements which are
Hmm.
happening. Another big movement, and I heard the news recently that EU has announced this massive, I think 150, or if I'm not wrong, I think 500 billion fund. It's quite, but got the numbers right. But it's a big fund that is happening specifically for the rearmament of the EU, and essentially that means a lot of manufacturing, especially defense spending. Do you expect? Do you mention that just say Tel Aviv has a lot of cybersecurity? Do you think Germany might be at the center of like a kind of new defense focused startups? They're in America. They're quite doing a lot of with drones, like a lot of work there. So do you see an emergence of that kind of an industry in Germany?
Yes, I do. So you started saying America has this and that. Logically, America has a lot of established defense companies, but they also have a new movement towards defense tech. Yeah.
Yeah.
So young startups that are developing technology that can be used in the defense industry. I recently spoke with a very interesting person that runs a fund that is also investing into a US fund that's also investing into defense tech. And they, for example, created small vehicles that are like essentially drones that you can send into a battlefield.
Like remotely control like cars kind of
You
thing.
can control it
Yeah.
from somewhere else, yeah, and they bring essentially weapons and other ammunition and other things into the battlefield. So you don't have to send actual troops to do that. Yeah,
That's really amazing. And
and as much as I see this happening in the US, as much do I see this actually happening also in Germany, because in Germany you do have an established defense industry. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not that Germany has been not one of the larger defense manufacturers globally. Yes, we are. And based on that, you also see defense tech becoming more and more important. And people understand that. And the question often is, um, how do you look at defense tech? Is
Mm.
it something where you actually develop something that can kill people, or is it something that you develop to support a defense
Yeah.
situation?
I was going to come to, the element of the M&A to it, that one of my personal problems is actually I've read information about like in a very long time and I can't really recall the resource. But if I'm not wrong, I think the way kind of Silicon Valley got its really, really
Mhm.
initial funding was that it was defense tech set up by Cold Wars and all of those things which were going on in America. And then the effort was, okay, let's bring academics on board, give them some money, and a lot of innovations like internet. It was developed for military use first.
Mhm.
Do you think now that we have the AI revolution here, um, a lot of defense spending and that kind of it's a drive? How would it affect the future of kind of mergers and acquisition? That I highly doubt if one country has developed highly specialized IP in this. They might not be having enough money. They might have enough money, but the opportunity for an M&A deal might be across the ponds. How would the complexity? What are the complexities that you're early kind of seeing that okay in this category, it is a movement. It is happening. A lot of money is being poured into.
Mhm.
But for your specific field, what are the complexities that you are imagining already that these are going to be unfolding?
Well, I think two things that jump to mind. First of all, I see established companies working more and more with younger companies, with startups together to fuel the innovation process in general. And I think that's a good thing to begin with. And that is happening whether we talk about defense or any other industry that we can pick. And it's really important because once you are an established company uh, and once innovation is an important part of your DNA, there is a certain rhythm that you're working in, and younger companies can cause a certain disruption that is often needed to even jumpstart that innovation even more
Yeah,
that exists. So I think that's um, that's number one that we see that's important
that's really amazing.
in that industry.
And how much do you think that give spending that? I love that you have spent time more or less at across every major hub. So you're the kind of person who can really give it like a very nice comparison. You think I personally believe that running startups myself as well, that the EU and UK included, geographically speaking, they have been quite behind in terms of startups, in terms of innovation. There's some areas where it's really, really high tech, but looking at a lot of Fortune 500 companies, even the day to day tech, I mean, I can't recall a single thing in this room in terms of specialized equipment that you would say there might be a UK, EU IP on them, but they're very much like an American sort of manufacturer, even if it's not. For example, the Apple's ARM chips, they're developed at Cambridge, and UK could have easily become the
Hmm.
global hub of semiconductor industry, but they IP'd it out, and even Apple's M1 chip, the Apple M series, they are based on the architecture which is from ARM itself. Is that do you now do you think we're gonna see a shift how geopolitics has shaped, or do you think there's a bit of a kind of a stagnation period and it needs a bit more push, more maybe capital needs to be deployed? In Europe, we tend to be a bit more efficient with capital. A company in YC gets 3 million, 1 million right after.
Hmm.
Here, 3 million, and they just consume that capital more or less in like I don't know a year or two. In here in UK and EU, 3 million at seed round, you are running it for at least 3 years or even a bit longer. which makes it hard to compete with American companies. And you can just see Facebook, Twitter, X, all the social media, a lot of chips, a lot of hardware, the iPhones, the iPads, everything. Do you think if there is a room for growth for Europe now, if you were to lay out a path, what would you say that this is what's needed to be on par with America, especially given how geopolitics has shaped up recently?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I think what we need to also understand is antitrust situations. So,
Yes.
how much of these transactions will be permitted by antitrust authorities, specifically looking at how the world geopolitically is changing at the current moment. So that's going to be an interesting element to look at and to witness. Um, if America is still going to be as freely to invest in European defense tech or not. I think that's one element to where I'm curious to see how this is going to pan out.
Do you have any thoughts like where do you think like it might lead out to?
Well, I think first of all, Europe needs an own defense strategy
Mm.
in itself as a continent of and the EU specifically with 27 nations in it. We need a defense strategy to be clear to everyone um, that is touching our borders, essentially what an independence means actually, and to be very steadfast and very clear about that.
Yeah.
That's why we need a defense strategy as Europe, as the EU. And that's what's needed over the next years. And that's why you see the money being poured into the defense sector as well. And it's not small money; it's sizable money, as you can see.
That's
And so that's an important part to understand. And over and above that, we have seen in the past that, for example, China was not allowed to invest into certain
yeah.
industries or into certain companies in Germany or in Europe because there was a defense angle um, that one didn't
With
want
core
to,
technologies, I suppose. Yeah.
exactly, that one didn't want to make available
Thomas, how
to
all
other
of this makes
countries.
your life difficult in terms of doing your job as, leading an M&A deal?
Well, it it brings a cultural element to it, yeah,
Mm.
and that's an important piece to understand. So, in a totally unrelated topic, let's move away from the defense sector and move into medical
Yeah, yeah.
devices. Um, I had the opportunity to help a company, a Chinese American company, to acquire a German company that makes stents for stroke. So when you have a stroke and either a vessel in the brain gets clogged or is essentially bursting and you're bleeding into your brain, you need to stop that, or
Yeah.
you need to take out that blood clot that has caused the stroke ultimately. And the interesting thing in that Chinese American company and the German company was how can we bring the talent that is on the one side in the United States from an R&D point of view, in China from an R&D point of view, and from a huge market point of view. China is the largest market for stroke patients. Um, and the German and Irish know-how, production capabilities, innovativeness. How can we bring that together? How can we make them work together in an efficient way so that they produce new products, new innovations that really shape the industry and are hugely beneficial to us human beings? So
Yeah.
that was a big topic. But then, at the same token, as to how to bring these people together, there were these standard, ordinary questions. Well, can you send me, please, a file with all the personnel information of everyone that is working in the German firm? And the HR department says, well, we would love to, but there is something called the Privacy Act in Europe,
Yeah.
and we cannot just provide that information. We have to have certain um, we have to have a certain structure, a certain framework under which we can share certain information, but we cannot just do a copy paste
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
send it
Yeah.
over.
That's
Yeah,
what they were expecting. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and this is the cultural element that comes in, and that brings us back to where we actually started the
Um,
talk about the human centricity of mergers and acquisitions, of buying
yeah.
companies. It's I need to bring everyone on board. I need to make it understand why we're doing the deal. What is actually the strategy behind it? What are key things that we want to achieve? How do we work in work streams across continents, across huge time zones? Um, these are things that are in the practicality interesting when you do projects like that.
I guess that's is that the part that you absolutely love, I suppose.
Absolutely. And you probably can see
I can
this,
tell.
that my eyes starting to.
No, no, I think, yeah, I think I've gone through a lot of your work as well, and I think that I can see that you try to incorporate that element everywhere, and it's very interesting to see because, and that's exactly what I see. I mean, for me, from an outsider perspective, it looks like a technical challenge. Our privacy laws here don't allow things to be done this way, but you think of it as a cultural and human challenge, and which is, I guess, the reason that you were part of some, out of Thomas, I would say the cultural part of the M&A deals. You've done 46 of them. Where do you think was, as a percentage, where was which do you think more the complexities in within them were more on this side, or what was the percentage that I've done 46 of them, and if I were to rate the complexity as a culture, 40 of them were complicated purely because there was a culture difference? Or do you think there were technical issues? How would you rate that classification?
Well, first of all, the challenge is that of the 46, 40 have been domestic
In
transactions.
German market or in EU
Yeah,
one?
so of the 46, 4 have been domestic transactions, so German deals.
Okay.
So in other words, 42 have been cross-border.
So a lot of
So
complexity.
so culture is part of my DNA because I always had to deal with
Yeah.
with it. I mean, even in German deals, you sometimes have cultural differences. But let's
Yeah.
put this aside. I mean, when you bring together a Chinese acquirer, yeah, that feels and that's kind of their understanding. We are buying this other company, then they are the ones that actually will tell the target company what they need to do.
Yeah.
But
That
frankly
doesn't.
speaking,
Yeah.
that's a very simplistic look at the world because there is a reason that they're buying this company in a different geography. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is talent, there are capabilities, and the least thing that you want to do is just impose. We are the buyer. We tell you what to do. You just have to march by our orders. No, you need to bring an understanding. You need to bring a connection to the purpose, to the overall purpose to the field on both sides,
Yeah.
and then leverage the combined know-how, leverage the combined talent for the combined business so that the business really can flourish and grow and take off. That's what's important. That's the interesting part. That's the human challenge that is is at the
Yeah.
heart of these transactions.
Thomas, I would love to ask you. I would love to pick your brain on that. I think we through our work, you have tried to sort of make an attempt, like with the Oxford class, that you are trying to teach essentially that this can be done. What is the kind of main objective with the class, and How would you be sort of teaching? What does the whole structure looks like for someone who might be interested in the Oxford class
Mhm.
from your side?
Well, first of all, I must say it was a terrific experience to film 20 lessons, 74 videos.
That's a long one.
That's a
We've
lot
been there
of
for a very long
material
time.
at Said Business School, which is in itself a very special environment to be in and to film that information. But over and above kind of that, those 20 lessons and what it entails, bringing people through the entire M&A life cycle, yeah, from strategy to um, the identification of targets through the due diligence piece, into what happens before the signing, what happens between signing and closing of a transaction, and then the actual integration. Um, what adds to that is that you not only, or that for me it was important that I not only bring that information to the table,
Yeah.
but that I offer also through the Oxford class mastermind sessions, so that I and the students can actually, or the delegates can actually speak about what's actually happening in their life and how does the content connect to their real world experience. Because with 46 of these transactions under my belt over the last 30 years, I have seen quite a bit of challenges. I've seen things going south, and I've seen also approaches how to fix things that appear
Yeah.
to go south and how to move them back on track. So that was an important element for me in it, to even more kind of get people immersed in that human centricity. And last but not least, being able to set up then a workshop where people can actually experience
Yeah.
certain parts of living through an integration, and that combination, that package as an Oxford class,
Yeah.
I think is where the value is ultimately.
For us, it was very interesting to work on that, and it seems like a plug. It's not really. It's a very deep, and I've worked on that most of it. That one of the biggest elements for us to really, which at least got me excited, was the part that yes, it looks like a financial deal and it looks very complicated and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's the customer. They, these companies, they might be you might be using one company's product, so you might be using the other company's product, and if individuals like yourself are not there, you end up might not be using that product anymore. It'll be gone because the company's suddenly gone. So it is that you very much rightly said that it is the field, it's the world, it's an operation hidden behind suits and doors and ties, but it affects consumers, and not just one person. And the case that you're working with 2,000 employees, their products are used by millions.
Right.
So that was so really excited for us that yeah, no one would know the how it really touches everyone's life. You're using a cell phone network that might be acquiring another one. That deal goes bad, your network is down.
Yeah.
So that part was, we thought, okay, this is something that's been touched by millions of people. Thomas, who's really the audience for this kind of a learning exercise? Is it a young Thomas who's living in New York and being part of another merger, or kind of people who are a bit more advanced in their careers? Who is it for?
Well, first of all, I've been doing these trainings for many years, and I've trained over 1,700 senior executives, and that already gives you the answer. It's been typically senior executives that took those classes that wanted to understand, okay, we are at this stage, we are going to grow through mergers and acquisitions, through buying other companies. How are we best doing this? How are we best preparing ourselves? That has been the major focus of my audience to take part in the
That's
class.
amazing. And Thomas, you and how is your wife now? Is she now, when you're doing all of this work, does she look at you like she's very proud of, you doing classes and talks and all of that? Or she's like, ah, who did I marry again?
I think she's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because for me, I think you came across a very sort of as a person who has a very great technical sort of knowledge base, but at the same time, you're very well connected with humanity. I think there's a lot of charity work that you do as well that we talked about in private. What really drives you from to wake up in the morning, apart from the work you have to do?
It's, you know, when you work in that environment and you can really make a change, and you bring the ability to families to earn their living, to participate and contribute to a big cause or to a big purpose. That's what's really driving me. And ultimately, when company A buys company B, this is exactly the environment you're in. A couple of years ago, I was involved in a transaction where a large, fast-moving consumer goods company was selling two brands and a plant. And when you saw the acquirer actually integrating, also from a cultural point of view, these two brands and that plant, it was all about, you're now part of a family. They used to be part of a large corporate where there was a very clear distance also from a private and personal life towards the business. And the acquirer had a very different approach to it, because it was a family owned company that bought these assets, and they brought that family element into it.
Which is
And
very key to Europe. I feel like there are a lot of family-owned sort of kind of you'll hear that word more for European businesses than, let's say, for American businesses. Would you say that's true?
absolutely, it's true.
Yeah.
And it has probably to do, and I have to smile a little bit. It probably has to do with one thing. An American builds up three companies in one generation. A European or a German,
Builds one company in three generations.
exactly, builds one company for three
Well,
generations.
I feel like I'm part of that boat. It'll be one company in three generations. That's
And
so true.
some of my companies that I work with have already their fourth generation on the start. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was at the meeting I was telling you I was just having before. That there was an element of family and all of that as well. But yeah, it's happened over 3 decades for them as well. So that's so true. That's so true. Thomas, absolute pleasure to have you here. We have a tradition that before we so the guest goes away, you have to tell us one book that absolutely spectacularly changed your life, that we want to give to someone who's really inspired by you, and they can leave the comments in social media, whatever, and we're going to give them that book, a physical copy, anywhere in the world. We can deliver, we can ship, that's perfectly fine. What was that one book for you?
which book I would recommend? Well, let me tell you, the two people that have really impressed me the most are Mark Feldman and Mike Spratt, and they wrote an interesting book, Five Frogs on a Log. That book is a book that, in a narrative way, explains the best way how to do M&A integration the best. So how do you integrate one company buying another company the best way? I think the Five Rocks on a Log book is really worthwhile reading, and it's an easy and nice read.
The title has me excited already. Thomas, for people to find out where they can find you, where are your social links, how would you sort of interact with people?
Well, first of all, logically on LinkedIn, they can find me under Thomas H. Kessler. So don't forget the H, otherwise you get the football player that's playing for Cologne, our local soccer club. No, Thomas H. Kessler on LinkedIn, and then my website is blackboardma.com. Blackboardma.com.
You have that, folks, blackboardmna.com. Thomas, absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.